Hello, I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Careers. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Treasury Intelligence, 5 Dimensions of a Million Dollar Proposition. I would like to thank our webinar partner, TIS, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. The evolution of the Treasury function involves more ownership of business intelligence and analytics. Unlocking the strategic value of business intelligence involves having technology beyond Excel and ERP modules. Investments in Treasury technology has historically been a tough sell. The good news is that the business case for the right technology can be a $1 million value proposition. Today, we will review the value of business intelligence done right and specific dimensions of a $1 million business case for Treasury intelligence. My co-speaker, Giancarlo Londini, will share case studies of companies who have realized significant ROI for an investment in Treasury technology, including lower IT costs, lower operational costs, lower bank fees, better relationships with suppliers and customers, and increased productivity within Treasury and beyond. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury Careers, cover a few housekeeping items, and then review our learning objectives as they represent our value proposition to investing your valuable time with us today. Treasury Careers offers content and resources that empower Treasury professionals to own their career success. I encourage you to visit us at www.treasurycareers.com. Now, for the exciting housekeeping items. The slides are currently available in the handouts area of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you have any issues downloading the slides, please send me an email at ernie@360thoughtleadership.com. For those of you on the webinar who are interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all polling questions and remain on for the duration of the webinar. We'd love to hear from you today, so we can take your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll do our best to get to your questions during the Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. Fear not. If we do not get to your question, we will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. Now, our learning objectives, our value proposition to you today. We'd like you to understand the value proposition of business intelligence done right. We'd like you to identify specific opportunities to leverage business intelligence to mitigate costs, impact productivity, improve internal collaboration, and develop more valuable relationships with banks, suppliers, and customers to impact the bottom line. We'd like you to be able to deliver Treasury intelligence to optimize liquidity, control payment types and timing, mitigate financial and information risk exposures, and impact performance within and beyond finance. And we have one more objective, which is not a learning objective, it's my personal objective as the webinar host. I want you to take an action as a result of the webinar today, whether that's having a conversation with one of your colleagues within Treasury, Finance, Accounts Payable, Accounts Receivable, whether that's sending a LinkedIn request to myself or my co-speaker. Like I said, I want you to take an action, asking a question, going to the TIS website. It's very important that we're offering you content that inspires you to take an action. Our agenda for today, how are we going to accomplish our learning objectives? I'm going to start off with business intelligence done right and the dimensions of information value. So I'm going to take us a little bit above Treasury to a more business-wide perspective, accounts payable and accounts receivable, even though at many companies we're starting to see AP and AR roll up to Treasury. Then I'm going to talk about the $1 million value proposition of Treasury intelligence. And then that's the theoretical part. And then we get to Giancarlo's piece, which is going to be how it's actually done and how companies are actually realizing the tremendous benefits of leveraging Treasury intelligence. Then we're going to wrap things up with Q&A and some closing thoughts. So business intelligence done right delivers enterprise visibility. We always say you can't manage what you can't see, so it's very important. So visibility within finance, beyond finance. It facilitates data-driven decision-making, and that goes beyond Treasury. So business intelligence, we want to deliver the right information, the right time, the right people, not only in Treasury, but in finance, AP, AR, marketing, and sales. And it really facilitates more productive relationships. So internally, which is what I'll really focus on, Treasury, finance, sales, marketing, AP, and AR, and then also with customers, suppliers, and bank partners. And Giancarlo will really focus on that piece in terms of the case studies that he's going to review in terms of how companies have leveraged business intelligence to facilitate more productive relationships. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take your temperature a little bit. Go ahead and launch our first polling question, asking you to share with us the prevalence of data-driven decision making at your company. We appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Just a reminder, those of you who are interested in receiving CTP credits for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions. Also, your first reminder, we can take your questions in the questions box of your GoToWebinar control panel anytime. We have a great opportunity to tap the expertise of Giancarlo, so I encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. I'm going to go ahead, leave the polling question up for a few seconds, then I'm going to go ahead and close the results. I'm going to give you my initial reaction, and then we might just bring in Giancarlo to see what his thoughts are and see if this is consistent with what he's been seeing as he's recently been in the US doing roundtables across the country with Treasury leaders. So I'm going to go ahead and close webinar, go ahead and share the results. So it looks like very, very good, very surprised, pleasantly surprised to see 37% of you have the vast majority are based on data, your decisions are based on data, which is fantastic. Of course, we still have some work to do. So those of you in the small percentage, decent percentage, and even at half, hopefully we're going to inspire you to move up to that vast majority. And those of you in the don't know category, here's your takeaway. Have a conversation, talk to your folks in the analytics place and find out what that might be, and then you can help identify opportunities to increase that. So Giancarlo, do you have any initial thoughts based on the polling results here?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Ernie, and a very nice hello from my side also. I think this poll really shows exactly what we're hearing at the roundtables we're joining today, and you need that data. And if you cannot, see the data, you cannot make a clear strategic decision. So this reflects very much what's happening out there. I would say the fact that some people don't know, that's an indicator which increases the validity that you need to know where your data is. So very happy to later on discuss these together and present these also, how we can prevent this from happening.
Great, thank you very much. So let's dig in a little bit. Visibility, I call it strategic gold. And so it's amazing when you get that visibility, the opportunities kind of jump out at you to make improvements across the enterprise. So in my mind here, we want to focus, there's relationship dynamics where it offers tremendous value internal across departments within Treasury, Finance, AP/AR. And what you're doing is if you're providing them the right information at the right time, you're actually improving performance. And from Treasury and Finance, we're impacting performance across the enterprise. Your supplier relationships, we'll talk about this a lot more. We talk about accounts payable, that visibility really allows you to create productive supplier relationships, which open opportunities on working capital optimization. And then, of course, it's always important to focus on those customer relationships. And we'll talk about how the business intelligence in the accounts receivable arena allows us to improve those customer relationships. So it's tremendously valuable dimensions of value. And then, of course, bring things back to Treasury, your cash flow dynamics. It really helps us understand that, how, why, when, your cash outflows, again, accounts payable, your inflows, accounts receivable. And then, of course, we have to bring in our bank relationships because that is really what really generates some of that visibility, gives us our cash position, really allows us to optimize that liquidity. So business intelligence in terms of accounts payable, just kind of a summary slide of some of the impacts that I've seen. A very hot topic that I've seen is accounts payable automation, the automation, improving workflow and improving that visibility. And so it's just interesting to see that the value of that information. Here you can quantify the value of that information. cost to process a single invoice, that goes down. Your time to process a single invoice goes down significantly. You have invoice exception rate going down, and just the whole workflow goes down, improves productivity across the accounts payable process. Again, the other side of it is that what we see on the supplier relationship side, so we see improvements in relationships. Companies are able to become proactive instead of reactive in relationships. A lot of times there's supplier portals out there that help us manage data. A lot of the causes of issues are from data asymmetry. So as we get that visibility, give that visibility to our suppliers, we're leveling that playing field. And then one of the pain points obviously is late payment. So we need to look at bottlenecks and information in terms of how we can make sure that we're processing invoices effectively. And then as we process invoices effectively, it allows us to take discount opportunities. So a lot of companies don't have visibility and they're not making educated decisions on why they're taking discounts and why not. And also, the faster you can process the invoice, the more opportunities you have to try and engage your suppliers in programs like dynamic discounting and supply chain. So again, those accounts payable is a very important place for business intelligence, and that the impact that I see is on lowering costs, but in improving those supplier relationships. And having good supplier relationships also allows us to negotiate and take more control of how we make payment. So that's the first part. So you want to optimize your payments portfolio. Are we paying by check, electronic payment? So how do we get we have a good relationship with our supplier if we want to help educate them as to the benefits of receiving a certain type of payments. Electronic payments are much more efficient on our side, and then we can communicate the value to our suppliers. And if it's done right, we can show them how accepting certain types of payments lowers their AR processing costs. So that's all tremendously valuable. The other side of it is the last thing you want is a disruption in your supply chain. So we want to take control over that relationship. We want to have visibility into all the communications that happen. And from finance, we want to engage our suppliers on a continual basis, not just when there is an issue. So we don't want to be issue managers. We want to become strategic partners from Treasury and Finance. So again, accounts payable, tremendous value there to working with them to deliver that business intelligence. Now we're going to go ahead and shift to our next polling question. Just to get a sense from the audience, if you could share with me how you would characterize the overall state of your company's relationships with your suppliers. Again, I think this is an interesting question, and if there are things that are going on which are not so good, hopefully this will this will help incentivize you to go talk to your AP staff and look at how you communicate with your suppliers and really invest in those more productive relationships. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another 10 seconds or so. Again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions. Those interested in CTP credit, you need to answer all polling questions and stay in the line with us for the rest of the webinar. So let me go ahead and I'm going to close the polling question and take a quick peek at the results. And I am pleasantly surprised, I guess, to see that there's really very few of you in the no good but getting better or no good. And that might be a little bit overly optimistic. I'm going to have to be honest with you. So, and then those of you in acceptable, what that means is there are tremendous levels of opportunity. So those of you who might not be have those direct relationships, maybe you're the treasurer or CFO, I encourage you to go and talk to your AP folks and just see what are the pain points that they're experiencing with their suppliers. Are they having data management issues? How much time are they spending resolving issues with suppliers? So, so to me, this is great, and it's an optimistic view that we have there on that front. So let's go ahead and really put a fine point in terms of the an accounts payable. So I like to point people to the places where we have a good slides to print out. So BI, valuing accounts payable, transparency and visibility. What does that allow? Discounts to be captured. It can mitigate payments fraud risk exposures. A lot of that can be done in terms of removing manual processes, but also in terms of the payments types, because checks are the highest incidence of payments fraud. So changing your portfolio mix can mitigate those payments, and it facilitates a culture of continuous improvement. Just having that visibility, you can look at bottlenecks, so it just creates a great culture. It can improve your supplier relationships. Again, what type of payments that you're making, your portfolio, and then when you're making them, you can impact employee productivity as people are not spending time on manual processes. Again, information helps you identify areas where there's opportunities for automation. And then, of course, it improves working capital management, helps us on our cash forecasting side, which is fantastic, and helps us optimize when those outflows are occurring. So the AP side can be tremendously valuable. Now we're going to switch gears to the AR side. So I'm going to ask you to share with me to characterize the level of collaboration between AR and Treasury at your company. At some companies, AR reports up through Treasury. When I was a Treasury manager, the credit manager reported up through Treasury. So we had some good collaboration there. Accounts receivable is definitely a place where I see that Treasury should have a very close partnership if it's not reporting up through Treasury. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this polling question up for another few seconds. And again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering the polling question. And again, we'd love to have your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds here, then we'll take a quick peek at the results here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question and share. So this is pretty much in line with what I would have expected. I would have expected maybe a little more in the good, but I see that, so we've got almost 50% where there's definitely that room for improvement. So I think there's definitely some opportunities there. And then 16% in the I don't know. So one of the themes of the webinar that hopefully you're getting in terms of effective business intelligence is you need to collaborate across the enterprise. So it's a good idea to do that assessment, maybe take a look in the mirror, maybe get your team together and have them indicate to you what they feel is the quality of that relationship. Giancarlo, would you like to give us your thoughts on the polling results here?
I think I also would have expected a little bit the same like you, more in the good part. But I think it's sometimes the communication between accounts receivable and treasury can be complex because of the decentralized structure and a lack of a centralized view. So sometimes that could be one of the issues why the collaboration doesn't always work. And that's why some said adequate, but we need to get better. So I think I agree there is still room for improvement. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll switch gears a little bit and we'll talk about business intelligence and value in terms of accounts receivable. And I wanted to share some great content that I had from a recent webinar talking about the value of reporting and information in terms of the accounts receivable perspective. But it's not only the information that you get, but how it's delivered. In some companies, they might have the information, but they really have what I call information value leak, because they get into this vicious reporting cycle. So just an example, from the HR side, we have many input sources. Here's a typical process. You have an analyst extracting the data, you're manually building the reports, you're sending the same reports to everyone, and then what happens? You have different consumers, you have your finance execs and your functional managers. What happens? There's this vicious cycle. Okay, well, I need more insights, I need more reports. So you're it's a very inefficient process. And the root cause, what I see in terms of, is really understanding your consumers. So where are opportunities to deliver value? I need to understand my consumers, but in general, across departments, what you're going to see is this is a good breakdown for consumers, finance executives, functional managers. In treasury terms, maybe it's the treasurer, maybe it's your treasury manager. So it's a good way to look at that. You want to look at what their expectations are and how to meet them. And here's some of those common challenges that we have. No real-time information, resource and time intensive, data overload, and then drill down based on requirement. And what we'll see, which is the root cause of this, is a lot of times not having the right technology in place. So technology can certainly be a cure for that, but you really have to understand your consumers of the data, what they need and what information they need to make better decisions to impact that productivity across the enterprise. So just taking a little bit of a deeper dive here. So just in terms of the two consumers in AR, you got your finance, you got your functional managers. Yeah, what are we looking for? They want to look at a cash flow analysis, also valuable in educating our investors. They want the high level, right? And then functional managers, they want an in-depth analysis and individual analyst level monitoring. So when I was in Treasury, we definitely had this issue. So a lot of times reports are being pumped out and we don't really understand the value that they're having. We're just pumping out one version of a report. We're not letting people do any self-surface to drill down. So those are some of the causes that we have. And then just to look at your consumers, again, you can use this framework for Treasury and AP as well. Look at who are your consumers in AR. You want to look at the effectiveness, and then you want to be able to spot the trends up or down and ask those questions. Your functional managers, you want to look at the health of your processes, collections, deductions, operation. You want to look at the productivity, and then you want to look at your customer level insight. Here we go, better customer relationships, delinquent resolution of those deduction issues. And then here's the value that we can get from delivering that business intelligence from accounts receivable, lower past due accounts and amounts, lower DSO. Again, facilitate that culture of continuous improvement. Again, this is extremely important. Improve customer relationships, faster customer onboarding. Again, more control of payment types and timing, proactive deduction of issue resolutions, and then opportunities to improve the AP processing costs of your customers. So you kind of flip it there. So you want to be a strategic partner to your customers. AP and AR can be extremely valuable in terms of building relationships with your suppliers and customers. And then, of course, improve productivity, and of course, working capital management, the art of getting paid quickly, getting paid the full amount, and so forth. Optimizing, it's all about optimizing the cash conversion cycle. So now we're going to go ahead, before we delve down into Treasury, we're going to ask you to share with us the most important strategic initiative at your company in Treasury over the next 12 months. Interested to see here, and will help us focus the rest of our presentation. So once again, a reminder to those of you who are interested in CTP credit, you will have to answer all of our polling questions here today. Also want to remind you that we can take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Again, we'll do our best to get to your questions at the tail end of the webinar during our Q&A session. So in order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to go ahead and leave this one up for another 5 seconds or so. Again, we'll take a quick peek at the results, and we might just bring in Giancarlo to give his tremendous insights as well. Let me go ahead and close that polling question and share the results. So it looks like, which is not too surprising. I like to see 41% using technology to improve processes, and then of course more efficient and cost effective. That's good as well. So we've got the vast majority there. We have 11% in other, and then a little bit lower than I would expect it to improve the transparency. I think that's really undervalued. So hopefully, just from my part of the presentation, you've seen that that's really the top line goal. In order to achieve those other objectives, you have to have that transparency and visibility first. So I would say that, that as part of those initiatives, the top level above that should be to increase that transparency. Giancarlo, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I also had the same impression that that's a bit too low, the improved transparency in Treasury and payments, because actually having that, you have more control and more, you can make decisions in a more effective way. I do agree that having technologies that improve the processes and reporting helps to make transparency more available. So you have to have a clear process, but you have to also have transparency in the process. If you don't have that, you can have lots of process, but they are detached from another, and that doesn't help, because then you cannot make those right decisions, and you will run into risk and fraud situations. So I think it's a good point that today we are talking openly about these elements.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go back and get to the drum roll here. Everyone's been waiting. The 5 dimensions of the $1 million value proposition. Little drum roll there. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through these on a theoretical level, and then we're going to bring in Giancarlo, which is part of the presentation I always love. I put my practitioner hat on, and I get excited to hear Giancarlo tell us exactly how it's being done. So the 5 elements, we have improvements in working capital management. We have risk exposure mitigation. We have bank relationship management, which has many pieces, process and IT resource efficiency, and employee productivity. So I'm going to go ahead and dive down into these specific elements here real quick before we pass the floor over to Giancarlo. So we got working capital management. How can we get value there in terms of Treasury? Well, that information can help us improve cash forecasting. We talked about that already. We want to optimize the payment types. We also can optimize our payments currency. We want to have a visibility into our currency exposures, correct? So we want to make sure that we're not entering into foreign currency transactions we don't need to. We're not creating risk exposures, and also it gives us the ability to see if we can get any natural hedges in place, and then we can start to work on optimizing the receipt types, the currency, and the timing. All of that allows us to improve the working capital management. So all these are components of that dimension of that value proposition. Just in terms of optimizing payment types and cash forecasting, the benefits can be tremendously valuable. Risk exposure mitigation, I talked about this a little bit already. FX risk exposures, where are they? What's the timing? Where are they coming from? You do get a better handle on your compliance risk exposures, your regulatory exposures. For Treasury, your debt covenants, you can get visibility into when you're bumping up against your covenants, and then your FBAR regulations, your fraud risk exposures, your data risk exposures, and then your supply chain risk exposures. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to quantify some of these exposures, but you can definitely do so on the FX side of things. And then on your fraud risk exposures as well, I think we can do that as well. And then we can probably do that as well with data risk exposures if we look at how we decrease the probability of that data breach and what that means as well in terms of not only Treasury information, but other types of information. So, and then we talk about bank relationship management, a topic near and dear to my heart. Not only did I used to deal with this as a Treasury practitioner, I used to manage the service codes at the AFP, so this is near and dear to my heart. So a big place where we can really get some value is in the terms of bank fees and really mitigating those. We have to have visibility into those. We have to be able to benchmark those, and we have to be able to do analysis. So the visibility, we can get a handle on that. I think Giancarlo will talk about that. There are different resources to benchmark, and then the analysis of those service codes and what those means. There's a full webinar on that, and there are solutions that will allow you to do that. I would encourage you to look at those resources so you can really understand what you're paying for and why. And then it can help us in terms of credit availability and access, so we can get a look at how we're managing the capital we have access to, so we can get an immediate sense of, okay, what have I got left with Bank of America? Okay, I need to fund Europe, and so it's very good to help you manage that side of it. And then the efficient account administration. I cannot tell you how many hours I spent account opening and account closing, and just signatory management. So those are hours taken away. It makes you a lot less productive. Also can expose you to quite a few risks. So bank relationship management, again, those bank fees are critical. Credit availability, having access to the data, having good relationships means that you can get better rates and also help you understand the rate of return that your bank is trying to get and really understand your portfolio of available services. Sometimes you may not be able to optimize it in terms of totally mitigating the cost, because you have to balance that in terms of your access to credit. So sometimes you may need to feed a bank a little bit of fee income, but at least you're making an educated decision. In terms of process and IT resource efficiency, where you stand depends on where you sit in terms of how much time your company invests here. Obviously gets much more complicated the more bank accounts you have. and banks across the US, and certainly as you get into certain markets across the globe. You want to look at automated workflows. You have IT costs that can be involved in AP and AR processing, just creating files, downloading files. Your in resource efficiency process helps you. You can do help with counterparty risk assessments. It can helps mitigate IT support. So what you want to do in terms of the value is you want to mitigate the IT support for Treasury tasks. So a lot of the softwares out there in terms of Treasury and other financial systems, they're cloud-based systems, which allow you, the department, to take control over the software, including managing the software. There's no upgrades, there's no patches, there's no upfront capital cost. And then it can help mitigate IT support for data management and analysis. Back in the day, if I wanted to run a report, I had to do an IT request. So I think that still happens. So you really want to mitigate that IT support. And those IT costs can be tremendous. And I think you'll see when Giancarlo shares with us that IT value is something that really drives that $1 million number. And then employee productivity in terms of Treasury, again, just time lost, cash positions. Sometimes it takes people a whole day, maybe by the end of the day until they get the position. It takes them hours. What about your currency positions? How long does it take you to consolidate data, pull files? How long does it take you in terms of cash forecasting? Just in general, cash and risk reporting, and then the systems and the software that we spend managing and things of that nature, which can be fairly cumbersome. So in that, I have really outlined those 5 dimensions that we have. So now, without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Giancarlo Londiti officially to the webinar, Senior Vice President, TIS. He's responsible for global sales operations at TIS, Swift Partnership Management, and Global Partner Programs. He's a domain expert in the payments, bank connectivity, bank account management. He has a strong multicultural knowledge and has been in IT industry for over 20 years, international experience in cash management, electronic banking, and many other areas. Giancarlo, the floor is yours, my friend. Please take it away.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you very much for that great introduction. Thank you all for giving me the chance to let you know some of the real amazing issues that are happening out there. Yeah, the $1 million proposition is real. It's real because it comes from real customers. So what I'm going to show you today, it's what's happening today. And what we are actually looking at is organizations which have had to struggle to find these numbers, and we help them to find these numbers in their own organization. Because it was for many reasons which Ernie already spoke about today, and I work for an organization called TIS, Treasury Intelligence Solutions. The name should suggest that we analyze, because we are ourselves. I used to be a treasurer like Ernie, and my CEO and all the people who work here have been working in the same position you are probably today. We have people from cash management, shared service centers, from the IT, and we have people who come from the cloud solution. So we know exactly the background, and we have built a solution which is basically helping customers. We have more than 90 customers worldwide in 79 countries, and you know, our focus is really those payment processes. And we'll see now on the next slide, basically the reasons why the top priorities which are being looked at are the ones to optimize cash management, so the automation. So looking at the polls we just had a look at today, these are the topics here. You see them. These are other topics on the agenda. CFOs want to improve reporting and dashboard because they want to see they want to have that transparency. Yeah, it's not about process, it's also transparency, really knowing exactly where the data is, which is coupled with the process optimization globally, of course. They want to reduce fraud. They want to reduce cyber criminality, and they want to use digitalization to achieve that particular level of, let's call it, of knowledgeable view, and at a let's say, click of a button, they want to know exactly what's happening. So let's move on now to the most exciting part, which is, you know, what are the risks and the costs when there is no clarity and transparency. So Payment processes, just for you to know, they remain confusing and non-transparent in many corporations. It's astonishing how many situations we face when we go into customers and they tell us, you know, like they say, hey guys, look, we have these issues here. We're actually managing so many different e-banking tools, and you know, so many manual things are happening. We don't have that overview. We do not manage to see things, and this is a risk, because if you're trying to make a decision based on that information, you will have an enormous amount of risk that you will have to face. So you need to know exactly where your payments are. So let's continue. Let's keep here the pace high. So we don't want to make you sleepy. We want to make you aware. Awareness about where is this lack of visibility. And this looks like a very bad picture, because in here are the delicate points where exactly that attack can take place. You see here that there are many different channels that need to be used in order to get a payment out of your secure IT environment to the bank and all the way back. And all those little black areas is where somebody could actually attack you and take some cash away and could do exactly that. That's where that little person there sitting in the middle can actually infiltrate himself and attack and do fraud and take risky things and, you know, do things that you don't want, because there is lack of control. So how did other companies manage to resolve this? First of all, this is the way they did it. They said, okay, I'm going to put in the middle of all of this, I'm going to put a centralized solution which is completely independent from my back office system and from my banks. It's multi-ERP, multi-bank. It does everything that I need. It controls the processes. It's a centralized place where all my payments go and all my receivables go through. So I have one view. My legal entities see it. My my colleagues in a certain geography, they can see it. And if I need to make a decision with my colleagues in Treasury, then we go in our centralized platform and we can do all of the type of reporting and cash analysis and everything we need to know, so I can see exactly what I've got in front of me and I can make those right decisions. So let's move forward. This is the way the system looks like, but let's focus on one thing. What is it that it brings you? What's the advantages? What's the takeaway for you today? Well, it's about the value of a software as a service means a fully independent platform. It makes you provide internally, so you can provide internally a solution for fast and cost-effective implementation because it's already existing. So you jump on an existing platform used by all of those experts like yourself out there. So they're telling us what's market best practice. It's obviously pay-per-use, so you pay for what you need. There is absolutely nearly zero maintenance. It's scalable, so if you're saying I want to start small or I want to start big, it's no problem. It will scale, and there's no installation, and it's community effect. Best practice means you tell us the problems, we resolve them, we put them there in the middle, and everybody benefits from it. So that's really the trustworthy community effect that you can build around a community. That's the community effect. So if we continue here on to the next slide, we will see that you need or you require for decision making better foundations on real data, real-time data. It doesn't make any sense when you ask your colleagues to provide information which reaches you 3, 4, 5 days later, and then you put it all together in your nice Excel. That the way I used to do it at the time in Treasury. I used to collect all my data, put it into my Excel, do my pivot tables. I thought it looked really smart, but then at the end, what I was presenting to my CFO was actually obsolete data because something had already changed. We had an M&A, we had sold part of the company. There was, maybe we did been even attacked and I didn't even realize. So there are massive saving potentials, and this is the 1 million euro per year. Here comes the big number you were looking for. Okay, here we go. So there are massive savings potentials. Where are these savings? So please make this a note of this, because this is really important. First of all, those bank-specific e-banking tools. Okay. If you're just using one or you're using 2 or 3, there are costs involved, even though you think there aren't. There are costs involved because a bank needs to maintain those systems, so they will charge you. Yeah? There's an estimate cost. Our customers told us it's around $15,000 US dollars per year per operational and bank-specific solution. So that's approximately the price per each. And you can save up to, let's say, 300,000 US dollars. So the first one is the IT cost. The operations cost, that's basically tracking the liquidity. So tracking the account statements, all the administration of the bank accounts, a user leaves, a user starts, the master data, changing the master data, for example, the keeping of the documents. Yeah, bank-specific documents, bank-specific authorizations, that's an expense, an internal expense. You can save up to 200,000 US dollars per year. Then we have the annual bank charges. Yeah, these are difficult to look at because you cannot see them unless you ask the bank itself to define which cost you have per bank, yeah, per bank account, yeah, per user. And then you have the automation with the ERP. So it means whenever you try to take a file out of your back office system and send it to the bank, there's a lot of work that goes into it before you actually get it in the format and the type that the bank wants to have it. Yeah, so the IT has to be involved. You have to do the testing. The bank will say, actually, no, that's not working. And then you have to integrate the feedback from the bank into the ERP system. And then you have to also analyze the data. So what about the signatory power? Who signs where? Yeah, so IT is involved. There's a lot of testing to be done. You are involved. That's going to cost you a lot of time. So it means defocusing from your real treasury stuff. And we've made calculations, and we can also help you. We have a very nice business calculator, how to make these potentials savings. And there are companies, you will be surprised to hear, they made even more savings than what we present here, because they didn't even realize until they had our solution in place how many banks and bank accounts were in place. Now, that doesn't apply for everyone maybe here. Some maybe say, hey, guys, we were only working with 30 bank accounts and 5 banks. Absolutely not a bank account. Happened to me in my real life treasurer, that somebody said in Mexico, hey, I've got a zero balances account. Why should I be reporting? And there was 100,000 US dollar sitting in the account because nobody knew about it. Those are the risks, that cash which you don't have in here. So those are the savings potential. Yeah, happy to answer any questions there behind. And I brought today some case studies because it's nice to see some slides, but what about the reality? Who actually came up with these numbers? Here are some examples. First of all, DAXA. This is a huge logistic organization. So it applies to any logistic organizations wherever it is. They had payment process pains, lots of pain. They were using an ERP system called SAP. They had lots of governance and security risks in place because everything was done manually. There was a lot of effort from the ERP side trying to get those formats out to the bank, and there was no straight-through processing. So this is what we achieved. We did a migration for them into the SEPA World Single European Payment part. We gave them a very clear approach on how to manage their master data. So they saved huge costs through centralized management. You can't imagine a logistic organization, how complex this is. It was very rapid go live because the software was there, very small implementation, absolutely went super fast. And we gave them multi-bank compatibility. So they had, I don't know, more than, 50 different banks they were working with. Yeah, and over 2 years. So it was very difficult for them. And now, after, I think, 12 months, they were live with all their banks worldwide. So the benefits are end-to-end solution covering all the requirements, automated processing, formatting, connectivity, electronic authorization, the whole bunch. No need to customize bank formats in the ERP system, straight through process, and the compliance. Yeah, SEMA compliance. Okay, that was case study number 1. Then we go to the next one is, this is obviously printing. Printing, I mean, in the US, of course, there's a lot of printing going on, especially in checks, but this is a printing organization. They had very similar issues with lack of control and automation in the global payments. So they couldn't see who was paying, and that's bad because it's a risk and fraud. They thought they had processes, but they were fully decentralized, and there was complete lack of transparency. Once again, ERP integration was a hot topic. They were getting really hammered from the CFO, said they want to reduce those costs. It was costing them a huge amount of their budget. Their treasury budget was going into ERP integration. Okay, and basically they were looking for one-stop solution for formats, connectivity, straight-through processing, electronic exchange of bank statement, the whole thing. and TIS was the answer. Okay, so they gained transparency, traceability, and control. That's very important. So they could pinpoint in case there was some risk and fraud, they could stop it, and they can stop it today. Real-time status about the whole liquidity. Security and compliance was covered, of course, because we are ISO and SOC 1 and SOC 2 certified, and it was very rapid implementation, so ready to go. Okay, last case study we have for today is our Chroma. This is more chemistry. So you see, we went from one type, from logistic to printing, and now chemistry. Similar approach, similar situation, and a huge amount of e-banking systems in place. Lack of straight-through processing with the back office system. There was a lot of items here. We don't see it directly here in this slide, but it's a lot of topics concerning their salary payments. Yeah, they had a real issue with salary payments, and they were trying to really bring in their treasury management system, because treasury was doing certain payments, back office was doing another, and integrating these two was a real pain. And we managed to resolve this, and we had a partner on board who helped, and the benefit is they had measurable cost reduction in IT maintenance. They had a huge amount of IT maintenance cost, operations and admins, and bank fees, reduction of bank fees. This is a really important topic. It's not even in those slides. So imagine if you start reducing your bank fees by 50, 60, 70%. That's a very nice thing here. And oversight of the liquidity position and integrated view over payment processes, and obviously different e-banking tools, they have all disappeared. Okay, those are the case studies. I hope they were interesting. I hope those produced a huge amount of questions for you and hopefully help you. So that brings me perfectly to the next point. Exactly, Ernie, here we go, to the Q&A session. And yeah, I would like to thank you so much for your attention so far. I hope that was interesting and beneficial to you. And if you do have questions, happy to answer. Ernie, I give the word back to you. Thank you very much, my friend.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Giancarlo, and I'm going to warn you up front, most of these questions are going to be coming your way, so I'll try and take one myself
Okay.
when it makes sense. So a few things to start with. One, can you speak to, I know companies going in having certain expectations of the value that they're going to get right out of this visibility and system. Can you share with us like 2 or 3 of the most common, the unexpected benefits that companies are seeing from this?
I'd say one of the most unexpected benefit is the fact that integrating with their existing back offices. Sometimes companies don't even know what kind of back office they have in place and what version, what product, what kind of files they're producing. The second is the banking world. It's a lot more complex than we think nowadays, even if we believe there are standards out there. And the last one is, of course, the cost reduction. It's very difficult to generate cost reduction and to actually make it transparent. But thanks to our business case calculator, which we've created over the many years working in treasury and cash management, we've actually realized an opportunity to put those numbers onto paper. And it's great because you can present this in front of your, let's say, your peers, where you have to justify why you would invest in such a solution to improve processes and gain transparency. So that $1 million can be for real.
Okay, thank you. We have a few questions from my Treasury colleagues who are like me and they like to understand the details a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of how you are able to access all of that bank information? What types of systems, the relationships that you have? Do you have relationships with all the banks? How is that able to be accomplished? And how does that data flow get managed?
Yes. First of all, the data gets managed through web services API. So API technology helps loads because we can collect information from anywhere. And we have a so-called, it's a huge library of formats, which we built on a regular basis. We have we have monthly releases with new formats. We maintain them and we do them once and we provide them to all of our customers. And of course, with the banking world, we have all of the existing channels you can imagine. So there are the direct channels, the so-called host-to-host electronic channels. There are the standard SWIFT or existing infrastructures. And so we can communicate with all those banks worldwide. but banks remain a challenge because they change methods, they change ways of interpreting data. But that's our responsibility. That's the service we provide. It's a software as a service. We write service real big. So we provide all of those services within one platform. And customers are realizing that this is something that Treasury shouldn't be involved with. Treasury should be focusing on Treasury topics, on Treasury strategic topics. And format, communication, ERP integration, multi-bank, that's all something that you can provide. You can ask a service provider to manage. That's us, TIS.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll give you a break here, Giancarlo, and I'll take a question myself.
Thank you.
We have a few questions in this area in terms of just the collaboration that I was speaking with between AP and AR. So in Treasury, and for some of our attendees, they seem to, which was a little bit existent when I was a Treasury manager. There's a little bit of some silos there. So they're asking, what are some specific things that we can do to, collaborate more effectively? I think one of those is just communication. So it just might be going over, having a conversation, trying to ask them, hey, what's going on in your area? People love food, right? Take them out to lunch, and you might suggest that you have an internal meeting. So one of the things that was really incredible for me was we had a lunch meeting, and so I was a treasury manager, and I got to explain what I do to everyone in finance, accounting, and AP. And then as I did that, I told all of them how they impacted treasury and the value that they brought, and how we'd like to collaborate, and how efficiency in AP and AR helps us control the cash conversion cycle. And so those are ways to do that. And sometimes it's just a matter of letting them know you understand the challenges that they're facing, and then just showing that you appreciate that, and then you want to collaborate with them. You want to identify opportunities to work together. And sometimes what I suggest that folks do is, if there's a slide on a presentation that says accounts payable pain points, so you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to go over to accounts payable. I'm having a conversation, and I just bring up, hey, I'm just curious. Is there anything going on in terms of automation? I don't know how you guys get all these things done. Then you can start that conversation. Then you can say, well, I was on this webinar and I saw these things. Then you can share. The same thing with accounts receivable. So I think it's just a matter of building that trust. Sometimes you have to go one step beyond. You might have to go to someone who is a friend of someone in accounts payable and build that relationship. Because some people, they're kind of tough nuts to crack, and they're not all that receptive, but you need to make that effort. But usually explaining to people and showing them that you understand the challenges they face, and helping them understand the value that they're adding to the organization, and how you can work together with them. And sometimes I would go up to people and just ask, this seems kind of strange. I got someone in just a conversation talking about what they're doing, and say, if you could have 3 things that would make your life easier, what would that be? And then you don't have to answer. You digest, then you go back, do some research, talk, and say, hey, I found these resources here. Maybe you and I can work together to do that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, and I'm happy to have a conversation, continue the conversation offline. But again, it's really key in terms of extracting this value, that we have this information, how it's presented. We need to understand our consumers, what they want, when they want it, when they need it. But you have to be careful between what they need and what they want. What they need, you can deliver that to them. What they might want, you need to have that drill down capability in there. So Giancarlo, I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple questions back to you, and then we'll wrap up our
Sure.
Q&A session. So in terms of, you mentioned a little bit, can you give us a little bit more color around when you're talking, having these conversations with companies? Give us a couple of those low-hanging fruit areas that you're really continually surprised to see, where if companies just take a look under the hood, that it immediately speaks, there's my value proposition.
I would say hanging fruits are usually, the fact that there is quite a large amount of working capital, which is basically not being reinvested because there's lack of transparency, and they need to investigate quite a lot to find out, about these opportunities. I would also say that sometimes they go into so-called bank harmonization processes, and they actually have the information but don't know how to use the information, and they lack in automation of the KYC processes and have not a clear visibility also on control of the authorizations, for example. That's something which is touching on the compliance bit, which the compliance part, which the CFOs are looking at. And on the other hand, process optimization, it's something that you could enormously benefit from, but you have to first be aware of how your organization works. And usually when you start with the TIS, we go into these, let's say, conversations of workflow approaches, electronic workflow management. And that's where we find out that there are lots of low-hanging fruit to be collected and then brought in. And then all of a sudden, let's say, the benefits are coming up.
Okay, outstanding. I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question as I ask my last question to Giancarlo to wrap up our Q&A session. Sorry, two-part question. I'm sorry. So, so you've been going across, not only United States, across the world, having these roundtables. Can you give us a few key takeaways that you've gotten from these interactions? And then the second part is in terms of functionality and what we're seeing that we have seen recently in 2018 or going forward. What's some of the functionality that folks can look forward to in terms of being able to leverage business intelligence?
Okay, concerning the roundtable, I would say what are the takeaways there is most of the time that the CFOs are looking at digitalization. It's to do with having the data at hand and immediately. So it's about seeing what you've got right now. And the second takeaway, there's a huge concern for fraud. There I can see very concerned faces on tables where they are telling me openly that they do know there are risks they're taking, and sometimes they cannot be, let's say, taking care of these risks because there's not enough budget internally. And they're still cutting costs. They're trying to cut costs, but they cannot cover these areas where one simple, let's say, solution, centralized solution, could cover all of these, and and avoid any further risks. So those are the major takeaways. Of course, there's excitement about the new developments in payments. So the fast electronic payments, faster to generate, faster to bring to the table and to approve. And what's happening? What are the new functionalities which we are going to be providing? So the roadmap is towards a holistic value chain, let's call it, where there is a single point of contact, a single source of truth for both buyers and suppliers. And we're providing this new way forward by introducing, let's say, modern technology, secure modern technology, but on the other hand, secure channels and ways of managing this, and extending that supply chain finance right from the AP, AR, right to the banks and all the way back and to the suppliers, and providing that centralized, let's say, global platform for our customers. So that's where the way is going. But if anyone is curious, I would be delighted with Ernie to deep dive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and close our Q&A session. I'd like to once again thank Giancarlo for his tremendous content and insights. Thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
And I'd like to thank our webinar sponsor, TIS. We appreciate and share their commitment to thought leadership, which again is also evident. They have great content and resources on the TIS website. And also, please note you have the opportunity to request to be connected with Giancarlo via our post-webinar survey that we will launch immediately following the webinar. I appreciate you taking the survey. We always want to get better. And finally, to you, our audience, thank you so much for your valuable time. Make the rest of your day great, everyone.